Thank you so much for coming. Everything you see on the wall was done this week. And so there's been a lot of work done, and we'll sort of introduce the team. But I'm Troy Russ. I am the Community Development Director of the town, and I'm honored to be supported by Tortigalis. And if the Tortigalis team could stand up, they're a part of the team. Over in the back, and Neil, and then of course our planning team, Mel, Madison, Dan has been here, Dara, Aaron, Shay, Jesse, Jana, everyone in the town has been actively engaged this week. And so this is going to be about an hour presentation. There's a lot of work here. And then we'll entertain questions. And so this is sort of the beginning of the effort, right? This is a very important effort of what is the future of Crested Butte. So we all love Crested Butte, right? Its small town charm, its sense of community, its access to nature. We all have wonderful reasons why we're here. And everyone in this valley shares that. And what we wanted to do is capture our love for the community and its key values with the community compass. And we were drafting the community compass in direct response to the housing crisis. So if you remember the housing crisis, we're still in it. But this beautiful town that we all like for our own ways, it is changing before your eyes, right? Economically, physically, the land surrounding us up on the mountain, down at CB South. And the town has been reacting to this incrementally, right? We didn't have a plan of action. We had a land use plan, but we didn't say, all right, what are the true challenges of the community? You know, we know growth is happening around us. If you just look at the 6th Street corridor, the fire station and the voter approval of the new fire station is a response to growth, right? Mineral Point right next to it that we're putting in 34 housing units, de-restricting, is a response to growth. The school is expanding. So the 6th Street corridor is showing you that there's a lot going up and down this corridor. The town is landlocked, right? We can't expand. We have wetlands and steep slopes. And so we know we're landlocked. Our zoning code says what it can be, but towns never stop growing. They never stop growing. Investment is constant in the town. So New York didn't stop at one story. And so what we need to do is a plan of action on what's important to us. We know our market is changing, the development market, right? Land is limited. We know the free market is tailoring towards more amenities or tourism, right? So you look at the land use, they go to the highest revenue. And so we'll see an oxygen bar over a drugstore because it's higher revenue and less risk. And it's tailoring to the visitors. And that the zoning code is free market. But we're seeing these land uses come in that aren't necessarily serving the community. So we're out of balance. That's it. We have more community-based, tourism-based, or more amenity-based, more tourism-based land uses in the valley than we have community-based land uses. How many people go to Gunnison for the groceries, right? How many people rely on employers or goods and services from Montrose, right? There is an imbalance in the valley, both from a housing perspective, goods and services. And our community livability is eroding. As prices increase, more people are commuting into town. And all the consequences of more cars and livability in our neighborhoods. So we constantly hear, what are you doing about transportation and traffic? So this is a chance to be proactive, right? This is the town's chance. We can guide growth to meet our needs. We can play with the zoning code and say, in order for you to come into town, we need things from you as well. It's not just serving the tourist economy. So you can play with the zoning code. We can be strategic about the remaining development potential of the town. We can bring balance back to the market and incentivize and use town resources, but also the private market to build some of the community-based needs that need to rebalance that. And we need to look at improving this holistically, right? This isn't just about building housing as if nothing else matters, right? So the goal of this plan that came out of Compass and a whole bunch of robust community engagement is to improve the livability, functionality, and sense of community in Crested Butte by leveraging development regulations. That's our zoning code, our building code, our subdivision codes. Everything that regulates everything you see in the town is governed by the zoning code. And our resources, the town's budget, the town's land, right? We own a lot of land in town. How should we use that to build what we need to build? And do we need to do it? To stimulate the free market, right? We know the free market investment, as land prices change, there's always development. There's almost an insatiable demand for housing. You know, people in Seattle can have a home here. People in Texas can have a home here. There's a lot of competition in all resort communities, and that's a challenge that we have to sort of recognize. And how do we leverage that free market to actually build affordable housing and community-serving goods and services, right? So long the town is spending a ton of money, the county is as well. The public sector is building affordable housing. We're not getting the private sector to build it. And in every other community, the private sector responds to the zoning code, and they actually build housing. It's typically towns and school districts and hospitals aren't in the game of development. It's because we're simply out of balance. And so this is our chance to be strategic and be intentional to do it. So the Community Compass, after the housing crisis was declared, council directed us, all right, come up with the plan to address the housing crisis and everything in the valley. And so the Compass simply said, this is what we value, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And it was a promise to the community that we're going to do it with you. And so this is a very intentional process to include you. So we finished the transportation plan last April. It got adopted by council, knowing all the growth is in there. So we did analytics of all the traffic and growth in the valley. We needed that to understand what we can and cannot do from a transportation perspective. We're doing the historic preservation plan now. Historic preservation is critical to this town and the character of our community. So we're actually having a conversation, what is our preservation strategy? Concurrently, we're doing climate action because we know that's critical to the longevity of the valley and the health of our planet. So what is the town's contribution to it? All three of those studies are informing this study. So we're creating a vision for the community that responds to these guidelines from the three other plans, and it's called the Community Plan. From that vision, we're going to go next year to actually change the zoning code, set a housing strategy, and how do we invest town resources to leverage what we need to do. But our hope is to actually get the private sector to help us. So the community plan is the vision. It says this is how high we want our buildings, this is what we want to preserve, this is what we're willing to change. That will inform a zoning code, which changes everything. That will inform our housing plan and where we spend public dollars, and it will be implemented over time. This is not immediate. We build 2 to 3 ADUs a year. With the right zoning and with incentive, we might get 3 to 4. Right? We build 5 to 7 houses a year, and the private sector does. So the changes we're talking about, we've only built under the last 5 years 500 square feet of additional new commercial. We've seen a lot of renovations to our commercial buildings, but growth comes very slowly to the town. So this is not happening overnight. This is re-gauging what we're setting the rules so the private sector responds. But we do have town resources. So what is the process? The discovery phase is this last spring and summer, we've been studying the town, looking at what the land uses allow, where there's conflicts. We can say you can build this much, but realistically, you may not ever achieve it if you can't park it. So the parking regulations aren't matching the zoning regulations. So we did all the due diligence. We did a market study to show that we're out of balance. We know that the zoning code is developing more amenity-based resources than community. We see the paradox between our sales tax growing, but our disposable income shrinking because people are getting displaced. So the town is getting resources, but the community is not benefiting from it in terms of their personal wealth. So we went from discovery to desire. In desire, we did a whole bunch of stakeholder interviews. We did a survey over the summer. Hopefully you participated in the survey to really understand what you need this plan to do for you. And then we designed ideas this week that Neil will present. The ideas you see here tonight aren't the final plan. We're simply going to take your feedback and start editing this, and with you over the next 4 months, create a plan. And so that's the discussion phase. So we want to hear from you. We're going to come back to you as we take plans, and we tweak the vision, and hopefully go back to council in January, February to say, yes, this is the vision, and then we're going to move in next year to actually change the code, because the code is where it matters. So in the setting up the framing of the charrette, through the surveys, through our desire, our analytical phase, the discovery phase, we sort of identified sort of two areas, right? There's the areas of what we call likely stability. They're not going to change much. Everything changes. Investment needs to continue to come into this town, but the change is going to be incremental. And that's really our neighborhoods and our historic core. You'll see incremental changes. You'll see the steep change into the hideout, right? That's incremental. The building didn't structurally change, but there will always be incremental change. But then there's an area of potential change, and there's underutilized property. And what we mean by underutilized is the market. The buildings aren't reflecting its market potential. The lumberyard, very important use. We all love the lumberyard. But that lumberyard, if I were the owner or that owner, probably seek a place in Riverland and see redevelopment of that because of its zoning potential. Without doing a thing, it can become more valuable to that property owner. And that stretch of potential change, be it vacant lots up by Aperture, it's not working. So the vacant lots, where's the laser? That's not it. Oh, the middle is the laser? So Slate River, Aperture, we received a whole bunch of land with the deal to extend water. They have town water even though they're in the county, but we got all this land in exchange for that, and it's vacant. So that's clearly not going to stay vacant, and town wants your feedback on what should go there. The whole 6th Street corridor, 6th Street Station on the west side of 6th Street north of Gothic Field is vacant. It's zoned for 3 stories. It was going to be a luxury hotel. So the zoning code allows it to be something. Is what's currently allowed what we want? We can tweak with that. And then lastly, the Bellevue corridor, right? That's just underutilized from an economic perspective. So we know it's going to change. So you're going to see drawings and ideas that may be more aggressive simply because we know the economics there are likely to change, where the pink area is going to be incremental and really a stable area. So with that, there's sort of 2 tracks I want you to think about as we look at the zoning code. It's the zoning code itself, and how can we get the market to help us, right? Every ADU in this town was built by the zoning code. The zoning code enabled it, right? The town gave 1/3 water tap fees to it, but it was really the zoning code that enabled it to happen. We've received 2 deed-restricted units at Academy Place. The zoning code built that free of charge of the town. But the town has built out Paradise Park. We built out Mineral Point. We have spent all our resources to get Paradise Park. And so building housing is super expensive, and it's really hard for the town to do. So we're hoping the zoning code can get the private market to build more of that. Concurrently, there will always be town initiatives, right? There's always going to be town land. Their town initiatives. So you look at the drawings tonight, we're going to have the zoning code that is really a 50 to 100-year build-out of the town. And then you have the town initiatives, probably a 20-year build-out of those facilities. So it's going to take time and be patient. And as I said, the zoning code is going to be free market. That's probably the pace of what we'll see in town from the private sector. And then you have the town resources. It's sort of a 20-year plan that we're going to be outlining. And one example we could do, we just finished Paradise Park. We have no more money for anything else, so we need funding. But maybe we could do town parcel 1 and 2 up in Slate River, right? But think of a town initiative project sort of at that pace and where resources go. And then lastly, I want to just say during this week, in terms of what we've heard from the community for the areas of potential change, and that's the 6th Street corridor in Bellevue, that we haven't heard a lot of people opposed to it. The majority of people they're open to change in those areas. Increase mixed-use buildings and add more residential, introduce a variety of housing type, reduce parking requirements because you can't really add more residential units at our current parking ratios, and I'm going to go through that to a second. And then in the areas of stability, focus on tweaks. Where can we set right incentives so we can get more ADUs built, but don't change the character of the neighborhood? And just a sort of a note about parking. So our parking most zoning codes are copied from community to community. And our parking code doesn't necessarily reflect Crested Butte. It's sort of a copied thing. And the way zoning codes work, they're always based on independent land uses. So this is office and commercial. This is the town of Crested Butte zoning code. And it says you need 4 spaces per 1,000. That's very conventional suburban thinking. We are not a suburb, right? We're a very walkable small town that has excellent free transit. The planning profession recognizes that office is one use, but that office in, say, the Bellevue area is actually being shared with parking. They don't need parking at the same time. And so you can actually lower the parking ratio requirements simply by creating what they call mixed use or shared parking requirements. And those parking ratios can fall. It's now that you're sharing those spaces and the overall demand. So that's an example. You can do that with retail. You can do that with office and reduce the parking requirements with really no consequence. And there's examples of development that have lower parking ratios. I'll just say a market rate that are being leased and being used. The Meadows has 15 units with 0 parking. Where do they park? They park on street. We have 2,600 parking spaces on our residential streets, on-street public spaces that we could use to help people park like they do at the Meadows. In the winter, we have half that number. We know about the winter regulations. And so, I went backwards. So just looking at some examples, we have ADUs with 0 parking. We have Big Owls. We have most of Elk Avenue doesn't have parking, right? We can get market rate land uses to succeed with lower parking ratios. We shouldn't constrain the opportunity for affordable housing and commercials by unreasonable parking regulations. And so Neil's going to go through sort of all the types of zoning changes that we have to look at to change the area. But now I just wanted to make that note. And so what you're going to see is testing today. What does it take to incentivize the private market to create something? What can we yield on town-owned properties? So Neil's going to go through several examples through town. Again, these are meant to be examples. The zoning code, you can interpret the zoning code many different ways, and an architect does that every day. And so Neil's going to present their interpretation of the code. It means it can still be different from that. But I'm going to hand this off to Neil.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out on Friday evening. You could be in a lot of other places, and you're here, which means you care a lot about this town. So that's wonderful. My team stood up, but I want to say them by name. Rogelio Huerta, Bettina Sasson, who celebrated her birthday yesterday in the Charrette, and Chris Jonick. I also want to acknowledge, I want to give a special thanks to Crested Butte resident, architect intern, Hallie Anderson, who also helped us out, volunteered and helped us out for a greater part of the week. So thank you, Hallie. And then we had another person who was remote, who did the beautiful perspective drawings that you will see, JJ Zanetta. So, okay, so this is just a view of the town constructed with a model. It's it's not real. It's digital of Crested Butte. This is what it is today, looking from the southwest. And you're going to see a lot of stuff talked about tonight. And this is the impact it would have, all of it together, on the town. What? Not that much. So when you see some of the things and your heart races a little bit faster because maybe you think, oh my God, what is this guy doing to our town? Not much, actually. So just keep that in the back of your head. So Troy talked about the sort of areas we're going to discuss. And obviously, 6th Street is an area of potential change up and down the street. It's an area of potential change because a lot of it is literally empty. I mean, literally empty. And now I know that they used to graze horses on a couple of the lots, but they also used to graze horses in a lot of cities in America that they no longer graze horses on because they've become towns and cities. And one of the things I think, Troy said this, and I just want to reinforce it. If you want to house a workforce, you got to probably build some housing for them. And we can't hide it. It's going to be seen somewhere. So the idea is how to do it well. And we can debate what that means, what well is, and I'm sure we will debate that. And that is actually the whole point of this exercise, as well as the months to come. And I want to emphasize, because Troy mentioned the schedule, I usually like to start these things off by saying, this is not the end, it's really the end of the beginning. We've spent a week here designing, but we will continue to work on this and refine this in response to your comments, the council's comments, and the like. So let's talk about the first site we kind of looked at and explored, which is the four-way. And an idea that the town brought to us was the idea of moving the library to this site from its current location, and then perhaps adding some additional buildings that could be municipally or town-owned, or they could be town-rented to private entities, and you see that here. And then we suggested that so the library and additional buildings, we suggested that maybe that there's additional land that we could potentially use where the where the tennis courts are, to provide some live-work units that the town would own. What do I mean by live-work units? Literally a place where someone lives and works. On the ground floor they work, on the upper floors they live. And because the town would own these, they could charge the rents that they wanted to charge. They could be subsidized if they wanted, and they could essentially curate who occupied these, depending on the kinds of services that were out there that wanted to be here and that they thought would be worth subsidizing, whatever you all thought. So this is an opportunity for another kind of housing and to support another kind of economic activity. So we looked at that, and then we also looked at the idea of what about this gigantic parking lot that is just to the north. I mean, this is a really important site. It's right in the heart of town, and it's a gigantic reservoir of cars. Now, I know that's a function, but maybe not the best function in the long term. Well, we went through a lot of conversations about what to do there. Building a garage to reduce the size, not doing anything, getting rid of all of it, all of the parking. I mean, we looked at a lot. And we came up with, let me call it a very incremental strategy here, which is an idea of adding about 32 senior housing units here. They could be senior affordable, the town-owned land. We would lose in total about 43 parking spaces by doing this. However, we would also require another 16 spaces for the new housing. So now we're down 59 spaces. But we then added another layer of parking here, which is actually closer to the ball fields and to the building we're in now, added some parallel parking along 6th, parallel parking along Elk, and basically broke even. We're 3 spaces short. So what we've got now is a new library. We actually did a little addition, second floor addition to the Chamber of Commerce, added a bike mobility hub attached to the station, live work, senior housing, and in effect filled in the hole that is now there on Elk between the east side of town and the west side of town. So now it is a lot more comfortable and enjoyable to navigate between them as a pedestrian. So looking at this view, this is the model of that, how that might look, and then looking at that view, you just saw what that could look like. Now, I will tell you, we spent way too much time thinking about this cupola because, we're architects. And the idea is, you're coming into town, from the south, you'll see this, right? And this would be a marker, the library. And we did all kinds of iterations of this. This is actually a riff on the existing schoolhouse of City, and it's unabashed a riff. But it would be a great and so I'm not sure that any of us are convinced that this is the right thing, but it would be a great opportunity for a little design competition for what that could be. The live work units, and you see over here the new senior. Okay, so moving up to TP1 and TP2 sites, you see up here, Troy referred to those. We did 3 different iterations for both sites. And this is something of a mix and match, which is to say, version 1, which has 45 units in 6-plex buildings, 2 duplexes, and some townhouses, are paired with a strategy of replacing the tennis courts here, 3 tennis courts, a playground, a maintenance facility, and a bathroom. You're going to see 2 more schemes with different scenarios for each, but you could mix and match those. You could take one from this page and one from the next page if you wanted. It's all out there. One of the things we heard is that, well, that's nice to get 45 units, and it's wonderful to get a range of housing types, but that's kind of an expensive project. Okay. Another is to basically repeat the same architectural types that are being built right now, right here, and we get virtually the same number of units, actually exactly the same in this case. We get 28 senior assisted units here and 2 tennis courts. So we lost the tennis court, but we got senior assisted living here. So that's another variation. And then we said, well, if doing 3 buildings is cheaper, then doing 1 building is even cheaper. So we tried that. And 2-story building, so still no elevator. Again, 45 units. So there's no difference in the number of units. It's just the arrangement of the units, right? And we have a medical, it's a brand, what is it? A medical offices, it's clinic, whatever, clinic from Gunnison Hospital. We have 28 senior assisted units here as well, and an 8,000 square foot medical facility. So none of these have to go together. It's just 3 different options. Okay. Now let's talk about some other sites along 6th Street, what has been sort of referred to as 6th Street Station, which is a brand that was once given to the site by the developer and has sort of stuck. Okay, so here's the site of 6th Street Station. But before we get to talking about what we will do at 6th Street Station, I wanted to give you all a primer on what FAR means. How many of you have heard the word FAR, or the term FAR? How many of you actually know what that means? Okay. The majority of you do not, which would be reasonable, since it's a pretty technical thing. And yet, it is the currency with which developers and planners trade. It's everything. You could debate whether that should be the case. And I, for one, think it shouldn't be. That's a whole other conversation. But it is. And what is FAR? It literally stands for floor area ratio. And it's a number that says if a lot is 1,000 square feet and you have a 1 FAR, 1 floor area ratio, you can do a 1,000 square foot building. So it's a proportion of the square footage of your building as compared to the size of your lot. Now you would think a 1 FAR building would be about 1 story, maybe, right? Under that thing, right? 1 story, certain amount of square footage, that's how tall a building I get. But you would not be correct there. Okay, so here, let's look at these 2 sites. They're each 15,600 square feet. And by right, meaning in the zoning today, you can do 0.64 FAR and go up to 35 feet in height. So literally, you can do about 10,000 square feet on each lot. And that's what you see here. There it is. But that's not a possible building. Because first of all, you have setbacks, right? The zoning requires you have 5-foot setbacks at the edges, and actually 7.5 at the side streets and 5 in the front. So let's take those out. And all of a sudden, we no longer have our FAR. We've no longer met our FAR. All right, it's 15 feet in height, but we were very short. Now we've got to take out some more land because we need to park this thing. Parking takes up a lot of room. So let's take out the blue area again. So now we got 20 parking spaces on each of these, right? But we only have achieved 0.39 FAR. Now you might say, well, that's enough. What's wrong with that? Because no developer ever did less than they're allowed, ever. And that's actually the problem with FAR. It basically said, it actually creates a value to the land that is completely, in a sense, made up by this holy grail of a number. Okay, so, but there we are. Now, we think on 6th Street, it might be nice to have a little bit of a bigger setback, so another 5 feet, to make it a 10-foot setback. So let's take that, because we want to have retail and some cafe seating, so let's take that out and a little passageway to the parking. Now we're down to 0.32 FAR. We have literally half the FAR, right, that we started with. So let's add a second floor. Now we're up to 25 feet, and we're back to 0.64. Great. We got 5 units on this building. Okay, so there's what that looks like. Now, here's the thing. The code doesn't stop at a 0.64. It actually provides certain bonuses for doing certain things. All cities do this. All towns do this. It's a way to get what you want. You start with this number, but if you want to do more, well, you got to do some things, okay? In this case, the bonuses have to do with parking, but what we've said is, well, we want to get the maximum bonus, which is a 1.0 FAR. So now we've added a third floor. It's 0.96 FAR and is 35 feet in height. Right, so there we are. And that's wonderful, but we still don't have enough parking, so we have to chop off some of the building. We chopped off a little bit more for some, added some more, add some balcony. So we actually exceeded the height here meant to 45 feet in order to get the 1 FAR. Now, we're not proposing to go to 45 feet here. Trust me. I'm just telling you, this is how hard it is. This is what every developer is going to do. It doesn't have to matter that it's Mark Walters. It could be Joe Schmo. If one of you bought the land, you would do the same thing. Okay, this is just the way it works. And this is how hard it is, because you keep shaving off for this and this and this, and all of a sudden you can't meet these numbers. So, we just put a hat on that. Okay, fine. Now we go to the next one, and we tried a different strategy, because, there's other ways to, I don't want to say skin the cat after what Trump said the other night. So I'm just going to show you the same effort here. And I didn't know how well that joke would go over, but luckily you didn't get offended. So again, the same thing, adding, you're getting to the 0.64, here we are, but now let's go to the 1 FAR, cut out for the parking, and there you go. We managed to get it in 3 stories in this case. And we got there. Oh, no, that's only 0.6. Okay. That's what we did. We made it deeper. We did a tuck under. We literally built on top of the parking lot, right? So it's got a wall of a building of 3 stories, and we built backwards. Now, but we got to a little bit more than 1, so we'd have to cut some of that back. Now, there are 2 problems here. We didn't account for a parapet, which is a 3-foot of building wall that goes beyond the roof line to prevents people on the roof from falling off. Well, that's an issue because we're already at the maximum height. So we could do 2 things. We could lower the ground floor to 12 feet. The problem with doing that is you get really horrible retail space because you get net out 2 feet. You get down to 10-foot floor to ceiling. No retailer wants to go there. Is that right? Would you want to have a 10-foot space? Okay, I think she knows about, well, definitely restaurants, but I would say retail. So, and she probably wants even higher than a 15-foot, but we had to stop somewhere, Okay, so there we are. And when we cut out a little bit of a thing to get some more oomph to it. But the zoning doesn't require that, by the way. We just did that, for fun. So now that you know all that, let's put some buildings here. Here are some buildings on that site. Okay, each one of these maxes out the FAR. We've tried to give them ins and outs. Again, not required by your zoning, but because, we're trying to be decent designers. And we also, again, added a 5-foot setback extra. So it's a 10-foot total setback. Here it is from a perspective, from a view, an angle. Here it is. Ooh, that's kind of a little tough, isn't it? And here's a view of that. And I will say that we got a lot of negative comments about this, okay, honestly. Okay, fair enough. This is why we do this, right? Before you go into negative comments, this is what the zoning allows. This is what your zoning allows. We did not make this up, okay? Today, someone can do this. They'd have to go through Beaux-Arts, of course, for the architecture, but this is it. This is in this zoning. So this is what we're showing. Wait a minute, let me go back. That's what it allows. Our scheme, what we showed, did this. Not much different. We cut out some cutouts. We cut out a little behind it. So let's compare the two, right? We're showing our buildings 3 feet taller than what the zoning allows, but we're setting back. We've got other ins and outs. The red dashed is what we're not building that the zoning would have allowed. So what if you said, all right, we'll give you the 3 feet, and we'll give you some reduced parking if you provided affordable, or what they call deed-restricted units, meaning it would have to be at a certain price range, which the town and the developer would negotiate as a percentage of the area median income. That's a trade-off the town can make if it chooses to get affordable housing. But you'd have to give about 3 feet of height, 3 feet. So there's that view again. We made some adjustments. I don't know if you noticed, we just cut that down a bit because of that modeling. We did other little bits. So I don't know, maybe it's a little better. But the point here is that this is not what it's going to look like. This is what a couple of people sitting around a week in a room in Crested Butte drew. This would have to be designed. But one of the things you see here is the appearance of multiple buildings, which is kind of what Elk Avenue looks like. It doesn't have to be. The zoning doesn't require that. We did that because we thought it looked better. And the thing is the only way you could get that is if you had, in addition to the typical zoning, some additional kind of zoning measures that are usually referred to as form-based standards. This is a term we haven't talked about at all. But some towns use form-based standards, sometimes in addition to the typical FAR, sometimes in lieu of FAR, which is something we're going to talk about later in the process. But it's something that allows you to have more control over what this is. Now let's talk about one other idea here, about the height and bulk and all that. This is, this, I know, it's Elk Avenue. For those of you who haven't actually been here. This is just the street, it's what we call the section. It's a cross section, take a knife, cut it through the street. This is kind of the plane that's created by, went very fast. That's created by the building edges and the space between the street. Typically the way many jurisdictions look at height and bulk is not simply by providing a number, but by looking at the height relative to the dimension of the street. So here you have a situation where you have basically for one increment of height, you have the width of 2 1/3, right? So the width of the street is 2 1/3 the height of the buildings. Here is what we just showed you for Elk Avenue. It's 2 1/2. I'm sorry. Thank you, 6th. Okay, it's 2 1/2, meaning this is actually wider in comparison to the height than Elk is. It's not here at the moment. It's a shock to think of this, and it's unlikely it would all happen at once, but it is actually less squeezing, if you will, than Elk is. Okay, now let's go to yet another one. which is Bellevue. As you know, Bellevue is an industrial area, Zone C, but it does allow housing on it, and there is housing now. In fact, you can get up to, remember that FAR number? You can, if you use all the bonuses, get a 1.9 FAR on this street, which as far as I can tell is the highest FAR anywhere in the town. And of that 1.9, up to 50% of it can be residential, up to. That is what you actually are allowing today. Now, it's not easy to do that. There's a lot of hoops and jumps you have to get through, but it's theoretically possible. So we did a strategy here in which we looked at the redevelopment of the Alpine lumber site. Why? Because there's some talk of Alpine lumber leaving the site in the next few years. I don't know what the time frame is, but this is what we're led to believe. So we've got basically 3 sites. I'm sorry, but we've combined 2 of the sites. So we've got site 1, which is north of Bellevue, and site 2, which is a combination of these 2 sites. And what we're showing you here is, as shown, 19,300 square feet of commercial, 62 units, what is permitted is a 1.9 FAR here, and we have 1.8, so we're less. On site 2, which is the combination site, what's permitted is 1.9 FAR. We have 1.1, much less. But we're going to show you a different proportion of housing to commercial, right? So that is the big difference. Much more residential than there is commercial in comparison, which isn't to say you couldn't do it 50-50. So here is what that street looks like today in model form and what we're showing. Here's another view and what we're showing. Now, we've got a lot of notes about this, including this is way, multiple Ys, way too dense, maybe, and that's why we're here to discuss it. But it gets units, it gets some housing in an area that most of you really don't go to, and doesn't really block any views because it's up against the shelf. So if you're going to do some higher density, this might be a place to do it. And in fact, we did break one rule here. The rule is we went to 4 stories on the south side of the street, which is, that ain't allowed. So that's something to think about. So here's a view of what that might be. If you don't like that, we could have another view of the same street. One was a little bit more, woody and charming, and this was more industrial, because it's industrial, it's more of like lofts. And look, the way we designed it was housing is above commercial, but it could easily be more commercial up there. It doesn't actually matter from this image point of view. On this side of the street, we meet the code. On this side of the street, we don't meet the code because of this top floor, but look how it's treated. It's treated as if it's an attic type floor. It's not just a wall. And again, let's look at that thing. Remember this 2 1/3? Okay, well, we're only at 2 1/4 here. So this one is a little bit tighter, to be sure, because of that 4th floor. So maybe you don't like it, but what if that a 4th floor allowed you, again, the ability to get some affordable housing, deed-restricted housing. That's something that you can have as a discussion. Absolutely, you could have deed. So the tradespeople, the craftspeople, or the businesses that simply cannot afford the rents on Elk, which I gotta believe are pretty high. Would you agree? Because I walked up and down the street today in search of this hat. And there are actually a lot of choices, as you're not surprised. What was cool or not cool, depending how you look at it, is there are very few vacant storefronts. Now, in fact, I didn't see any, but there might be a 1 or 2. That is great from a liveliness point of view. It also means that developers, owners can charge a lot of money for those storefronts. It's good to actually have a little bit of vacancy so that there's some price competition. Anyway, so that's all of the areas we studied that are, let's call them areas of change. Not that there couldn't be others. Of course, any of the sites on Bellevue or Elk could be, but we thought we'd also talk about some of the residential ideas. Oh my God, don't worry, it's not gonna be bad, okay? You have in the zoning the potential for somewhere around, how many ADUs, Bettina? 308. She counted every one, so she knows. You have 308, let me call them latent ADUs out there. They're not there, but they, by zoning, could be there. They are unlikely to ever be built. Oh, 1 or 2 a year, as Troy says. We say that because that's how many are being built. And there's a reason why there aren't that many being built. Because most people don't want to do them. They don't want to do an ADU that is a deed-restricted unit. They would rather have nothing in their yard. Because they don't need the money, they don't need the income. It's a pain in the neck to do it. There's all kinds of reasons. So could we change that dynamic? In some ways, this is the most radical idea we're putting out here, although we think it's actually quite benign. What if we could add a little bit of bonus to prime the ADU pump? And the bonus is allowing you a second ADU, one of which would be deed restricted, but one which would not. Which means, in the not deed restricted ADU, you could do what you wanted with it. You could use it as a home office. You could rent it to whatever rent you could get. You're still providing the deed restricted ADU, but you get this bonus one. You also could get the bonus garage. You wouldn't have to count the garage against your maximum FAR. So it's a thought in order to see if that could encourage people to build more ADUs. We know people would love to build home offices. I mean, that's a given. The question is that enough of an incentive for them to do the other one? And honestly, you'd have to wait and see what would happen. So, whoops. So here, well, let me just go back. Here's the idea of that. We also changed the setback to 10 feet because at some point you need more room to be able to fit all this on the lot. But here we have an attached ADU or accessory structure, and we have one more over the garage. There are other ways of fitting them, look over here in a single-story garage or double or two-story, but another one over here. So different ways of doing it. Here's one over another ADU, and then a single-story garage. So here is, we tested a block, Cypress to White Rock from 5th to 4th. There is a very large building right here. It's got like 6 units in it. So that's like in case you're wondering where this is. So here it is, and here's the addition of the ADUs. It is three-dimensionally. And then here's what that alley could look like. These buildings on the left are all new. They're all the result of this. This is existing. We didn't just stick this in like, oh, what is that? So, it's there. Okay, so, and these are not surfboards. These are stand-up paddle boards. I just want you to know, in case you were wondering, what's the surfboard doing there? Because when I first saw these, I said, why do people have surfboards? So that's why okay, so there it is. That's that. That's, I think, an interesting strategy. Okay, so other thoughts. You have this fire station. It's going to be moving. What do you do with this building? I mean, that's going to be a fun exercise for the town to contemplate. It's an interesting building inside. It's got obviously big, high spaces where the fire truck's parked. It's got a weird mezzanine it's a little bit hard to use. Got a lot of space that could be used for any number of things. You could incubate businesses. You could have ghost kitchens. You could have other, who knows? So here it is. And we just kind of wondered what you could do with it. I mean, you could, maybe there's an addition that's more conventional, office or other use that frames the corner. Because right now there's some parking in here that's kind of icky parking because it's essentially tandem parking that the fire department uses. Nobody else could park it that way. So it's actually kind of a waste. So could you build a building in it? Or I think more interestingly, could you make a space out of it so that, you know, the heart of town, 3rd Street, 3rd and Elk, which some people refer to as the town square, and a block away at the Totem Park, which is the only really public place to access the creek. And then this potential public space could be in the middle of those two, linking them together, allowing other kinds of festivals and programming to occur. My first thought was at a beer garden, but maybe it's not something alcoholic. Maybe it's just a place to have events that were very local in their nature. So, okay, that was basically all of it. And, you know, what's next? Well, what? Oh. Go ahead. Just to make sure, give Dara a chance to come after you. Okay, I am totally going to do that. But I feel like I need to say this stuff, unless you want to do it. Because people want to know, like, well, what happens, you know? So we're going to go, you were going to go back and take a little bit of a rest, and then we're going to go refine all of this work. I mean, and hit the comments from the town, from various meetings, and continue to refine, and we'll do this through the end of the year. Identify, and through this refinement, we're going to identify the changes that would need to be made in the zoning to accommodate these ideas. And we will then begin to craft a set of theoretical changes, regulations, incentives. That will continue as the beginning of the year, 2025, with refinement and more community meetings to ultimately create this draft community plan document. That would be followed by some updates to the zoning itself. And then I just wanted to leave you with one more thing. Remember, this is what it is today, and this is what we showed you, right? So this is not an overwhelming thing. So with that, Dara, come on up. You're welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's very bright. So I'm Dara McDonald. I am your town manager. If you don't know what that means, sort of the ringmaster of the town. I don't actually do a lot, but I help a lot of people do a lot of things. So I want to start just real quick in acknowledging all the work that was done this week. These guys have taken, everybody who walks in has a better idea, right? And so they put their ideas out there, and they hear a lot of everybody else's ideas, and they take that in a really constructive manner and have continued to iterate throughout the week. And that's something that's really, really hard to do, right? It's hard to have someone come and like tear apart your work, and you take that and you do something really constructive. So I want to acknowledge that. Torty Gallus and our town staff did that all week long. So thank you, guys, for that. Okay, thank you. And acknowledging that they're being really responsive to what they've heard from our community. And to take that, I want to appreciate all of you who are here tonight. This is the biggest crowd we've had. And I think that that speaks volumes to this community. In this community, and the people who have come, who have continued to reach out to their friends and their groups and their networks. Thanks, Kylena, for putting it out there on Facebook and trying to get more people engaged, because that's really what we need, because this is really our community's plan. And as Neil showed on that prior slide, this is going to continue, right? We're not going to walk out of here, this is done. This is going to continue for months and probably years, really. So thank you for everything you can do to encourage people to continue to show up and participate, and to acknowledge that they're being heard and that we're being responsive to what the community is saying, and that we're working together to create this vision that's absolutely not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the next 5 years, probably not the next 10 years, but it is meaningful and will change our community over time, and change is going to happen, and we all have an obligation and a role in shaping what that change looks like, knowing it's happening, and what's our role in shaping that for this town. So thank you for being here, and I think now we're going to do pinups and hear everybody's comments and feedback, and we're going to take that feedback for months, really.
Oh, Q&A. Yeah. So we're going to do some we're going to, if for those who haven't gotten to look at the drawings or want to put more Post-it notes on, we'll do that after. But I kind of spoke fast, and I probably didn't encourage questions at the time because I was speaking fast. But I figure some of you might have questions or comments, and this would be a great opportunity to hear them.
And really quickly, we're recording this meeting, and we will post the slides and the recording online. Thank you so much to Ed for doing that. So for Q&A, I'm going to be running around with a mic, so please wait to ask your question until you receive a mic. There's also one more on a table over there.
Thanks a lot. That was a really informative presentation. My question is, if you have a block that's already built, mostly built out, and they're all at 20-foot setbacks, front yards, and you want to change it, how does that work with the houses that are already there? And then I have a comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And it has to, I don't know yet, honestly, because we would before we wrote that, you'd really have to hammer that out to see what blocks those are, and where maybe some blocks have more of a sawtooth kind of a thing going. So you'd have to really be very surgical in how you figured that out. Honestly, I don't know exactly at the moment. You could do something like, there's something where you have setback averaging. That's a technique, and you average up all the setbacks, and you do that, and you give a little bit so somebody gets not 10 feet, but they get 2 feet or something. Beyond that, I can't tell you because we have to craft that. But it's something that we'll definitely be looking at and being aware of.
Okay, thanks. And I have a comment, and that is that, I really do want to see more ADUs. I just have a real concern about the density that putting 2 more units in somebody's backyard would bring, depending on how many of those there would be. If they proliferated, it could get really crowded, and I like the feeling we have of not only the open space out there, but the open space in town that we have around our houses. So that's just my comment.
So
Thanks.
can I help respond? That is an excellent comment and an excellent concern because we are worried about that as well. But what this showed is an additional FAR in terms of allowing them to park and get that sort of market rate ADU in exchange because we're not getting ADUs built. But we said you can't add any FAR to the primary structure. So those existing, you saw the one new building that pushed forward. There were existing buildings. We're not saying add any FAR to the primary structure because we share that concern. We're not saying this is the answer. We want to float it, we want to test it, we want to evaluate it because you're bringing up an excellent comment that we're all concerned about. And how do we motivate, right? Do we do additional ADU? Do we give extra floor area so the primary structure can be bigger? We chose in this scenario to leave the primary alone because that would structurally affect the streets. But we're not saying that's the right answer. We want to get people's response. So thank you for making that comment.
Who else has a question or a comment?
Thanks for the presentation. My question is about the four-way stop rearrangement. Why would you build housing where there's existing functioning parking and tennis courts to rebuild them elsewhere and not just build housing where there's nothing?
Because in a walkable community, particularly one that is in a walkable community, it's better to have the housing near the services and amenities so that people are less likely to have to use their car, number one. In this case, we haven't actually relocated. I mean, the parking essentially is a one-for-one. There's no, and if, particularly with senior housing, it's really great to have it near everything else and not 3.5 blocks away. With the live-work units, they really want to be in the heart because they're providing services or businesses that want to be seen. So right now you have a situation where some of the most valuable land in the town from a walkability point of view, from a placemaking point of view, is literally being used for parking. There is no planner in the United States who would tell you that's a good idea. Not one. It's a really bad idea. Because parking doesn't generate, yes, it's a tool that people use to get somewhere, but nothing else happens there. It's a dead zone, literally. Nobody even wants to walk by it. You can analyze pedestrian traffic in every town in America, and you will find there's less pedestrian traffic where there are parking lots than where there aren't. People literally will cross the street to get to something where there's a building rather than walk in front of a parking lot. So yes, it's not without expense, no question about it. It is, and you know, the tennis courts aren't that old. I get it, but it's, you know, we put it out there because we think there's some value in that idea, but it doesn't have to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll just add quickly, and please raise your hands as the questions come, but again, going back to that really long time frame, especially as one of those properties of looking at leveraging town assets, that would be a very long, slow sequence based on funding and timing, so likely would not happen tomorrow, but say, hey, could that be a possibility in maybe 15 years or something like that long term in the future? Any other questions?
Hey, Neil. Yeah, I was listening to Dan Buettner talk about blue zones recently, which is kind of similar to what you were talking about as far as density and putting senior housing kind of central. And so I can appreciate the advantages of density and what, you know, blue zones would show. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that study, but, you know.
Blue zones are basically areas where people live extremely long time.
And one of the, you know, things that are common in blue zones is that density and the ability to walk and the ability to be social and have these moments of, you know, in spontaneous kind of social interactions.
Absolutely.
So I think that achieves that. I know that scale and height can be scary, and so, you know, I appreciate the density, and I'm wondering, have you seen other communities, you know, how have they embraced the height, and, you know, what are some of the ways? You know, you showed that fourth floor being kind of I guess an attic kind of feel to it, and I think that's one way. Have you seen other ways that communities have addressed that?
Sure. You know, make the fourth floor look like an attic is one. One of the things I observed in Aspen when I was there last Sunday, I'd never been to Aspen before. I heard it was pretty nice, so I thought I'd go. What they've done, it's primarily a 3-story city, but there actually are some places where there are 4 floors, and what they've done is set that 4th floor back. So you really have to look to see that 4th floor. I mean, it presents as a 3-story building, and then the 4th floor setback becomes an opportunity for balconies and terraces that can either be some person's private terrace or could be some amenity that the public could gain access to in some way. So that's another way to do it. Another way is to have more of a sawtooth edge. So maybe some floors are 4, but some are 2. It's not so easy to make buildings that way, but if they're separate buildings, it's a way to do it. And sometimes we do height averaging. So let's say you said, well, the height average should be 3 stories, but we would allow a few 4 stories if we had some 2 stories. So you'd get that. And we have found that there are cities that people cherish tremendously, that think they're fantastic and beautiful, like Santa Barbara, for example, that do exactly that. And people will swear to you that, oh no, there's nothing that tall. And then you show them the pictures. And they, you know, so there's that. I've also seen where this goes on, and if it's done sensitively, people within 2 years of the construction of the building can't remember that there was a controversy at all. Like, it just seems the most normal thing. So, but does it happen easily? No. These kind of conversations happen in every place. Every city that's experiencing these issues, and a lot of them are, the same conversations are being held. One other thing about the blue zone and senior, because thank you for mentioning that. AARP, which you may know is American Association of Retired Persons, their big policy agenda is walkability. That is because that is a key to a longer life. I could do a whole thing on health metrics and how we're killing ourselves with cars. not just because people get injured by them, but because we're not walking enough. And you have the setup for the healthiest community. It's one of the most walkable communities I've ever been to. And you really need to leverage that you've got here. Next. Yes, sir.
Yes, great presentation. My question might be a little bit naive, but I'm curious about the Bellevue area for commercial use, and I'm curious about like maybe going underground, like how, like what's the policy, what's the zoning around that?
Underground for the uses?
Underground for the use, yeah.
Well, there are a couple things. One is very limited value in those.
Okay.
I mean, there could be some of the workshops could, but by the way, the underground stuff doesn't count against the FAR anyway. So you could do that today, right now, and great. I mean, you've got basements that can be used for storage, or, there's some things you can do underground to be sure. Nobody's going to live there because there are code issues and the like, but there's a value in that to be sure. And as I said, no reason why somebody wouldn't do that.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Who's next? So I heard you talking about the possible uses of the old fire department. I'm really interested in you have any thoughts about the use of the current library building, because that building is like the most awesome building.
I don't, but some people do.
So town has a capacity problem. The marshal's office is obsolete and does not serve the marshal's department in terms of vehicle access, emergency egress. Town hall is expanding in terms of staff and serving it. So town hall's not big enough. We're actually considering moving staff to the depot. But we have a second floor improvement, but with the growth of the valley and the demands on staff, we kind of need the current council chamber for staff, but we want a municipal campus. And there's a lease, we own the library building, and there's a lease with obviously the library. So we want to come up with a plan. So that's kind of a 15-year plan because that's the length of their lease. But the council chamber could easily move into the first floor of the library, and staff and town could take second floor and and maintain a municipal campus without building a new building. And we think the library and its sort of ever-changing programs is such an important use to the town that the four-way is a perfect location. So Mount Crested Butte, CB South, everyone can utilize it. So that's a concept that we have. And that's why we asked them to take a different look at the tennis court area, because it's a really good opportunity to deal with town needs while retaining the library.
Over there.
Hey, I'm Rebecca. I live on Bellevue, but the residential part. My question has to do with the whole Compass plan. How much did the transportation part of Compass guide you in things that you did, particularly on Bellevue? The whole traffic issue. And one reason I ask is I'm sure everybody in town knows that Bellevue, the stop sign at Bellevue, is a big block for traffic. And more development on Bellevue. I saw the parking, but there'll be a lot more traffic going into Bellevue, the industrial part, with this expansion. Did the transportation issues guide you at all in this piece of the Compass plan?
Yes. The transportation plan, if you remember, Neil said the allowed FAR was 1.9, and the actual development that we're proposing is less. It's 1.8 and 1.1 on different blocks. And so what we did from a transportation is we retained a traffic engineer out of Denver, and they actually modeled growth on the permitted land uses, not the existing, the permitted. And we did a growth projection for it. So we actually know where traffic is demanded, and specifically out of the transportation plan was a pedestrian connection that goes from Big Mine over to Town Park, and making sure we get a sidewalk in there, so that's incorporated into this design. But yes, we've incorporated the traffic demands. That's why we did the transportation plan first, to sort of give the guidance to this plan.
Thank you. I did like the water sidewalk on Bellevue.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I couldn't hear you. Just speak closer to the mic.
I like the wider sidewalks on
Oh,
Bellevue.
great, good.
Very nice.
I just had a comment. Everybody in here loves Crested Butte. I know that because you're all here on a Friday night. And I just wanted, some of the stuff that I hear, I have access to a lot of people, and I hear that, Crested Butte sold its soul years ago. The town council doesn't care. They're not going to listen. And I think that we need to let our community know that they are trying, and that showing up is important, and that they're trying to do this, and they're trying to invite the community to be part of this. So on the first night, 24 people showed up. So much better to see all you guys here tonight. But I think if each of us tell 10 people and they tell 10 people, and we can really pack this room and have the whole thing full, we're going to make better progress with everybody involved.
And just to throw it back on you, you were very active in promoting this on your social media channels, and that was, I'm sure, one of the reasons why we have such an outpouring tonight. And also, I want to thank you. You're a very busy person. You're running, I don't know how many restaurants, but a lot. Let me just say that. And you came every day. Every day. And I can't believe it. I mean, she's not a town staff member. She's not on the council. She's a private citizen. So, the round of applause. And you should all eat at her restaurants.
On that note as well, I should mention that while this is the end of our week-long design charrette, this isn't the end of the town's outreach for this plan at all. And if tonight's presentation really spoke to you and you signed in, you'll be given a recording and given this presentation via your email. And please, as Kylena said, disperse this, have conversations with your neighbor, and get people to engage in this process as much as possible.
Great.
Who's next? Roxana? You want to go?
Hi. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the plan for the four-way. This is the first time I'm seeing this because I missed the meeting yesterday. And while I think the plan for Bellevue is great, and Bellevue really, in my opinion, should be kind of the exhaust valve for our commercial community, because we're losing the ability to be on Elk Avenue, and a lot of the local shops, I think, need another location to go into. And the height in that block, I think that's the correct block to go a little higher, because you're adjacent to a geographical feature that gives that height a different scale. I maybe having a little bit more of a struggle with the buildings that are being proposed on, I understand that this is not a final plan, but still, those buildings on the four-way seem like they're really out of scale with all of the other buildings that surround it. The one you're proposing in the parking lot is literally next to a very small historic feature. And that is, to me, the one, I mean, we can have discussions about everything else, but that's the one thing that's being proposed, those buildings that are extremely out of character, I think, and will have the most effect in changing the character of the town and the feel of the town that we have become accustomed to as you come through here, because there's so much open space there that creating artificial density, and I'm just wondering what and how you came to that, and perhaps how you justify putting that density there.
Again, I guess I'll come back to the, it's the center of town, and the center of town should not be dominated by a parking lot. And in fact, the tennis courts themselves tennis is a game that people love, but a very small proportion of the population play that game, and is better suited in a slightly more remote location. Whereas a library, which is needed, being at the corner of that site, is actually the most public site we could give to the library, even more public than where it sits today, which is in a half block back.
But it's not really the library.
It's what?
I mean, I would argue that that's not the right location for the library, but I'm saying it's not really the library, it's the other two buildings. You are displacing a very used amenity that's adjacent to the park. And that parking lot seems like just a parking lot to you, but in 2 weeks you will see that that is actually the site of a very important event in town, right?
Oh, I know, and that's
why
can
we
still,
use it.
and that can still stay there. We're not getting rid of the whole parking lot. We're getting rid of a total of 43 spaces there. Yes, and we're replacing them. So there's actually no net loss of parking. Zero. 100% same amount of parking. And the only thing we've done is taken about 40 feet along Elk and taken that out of the parking zone. That's the only thing. And I don't know where the historic building you're talking about is. Is that the Chamber of Commerce? That is not historic.
No, there's a little house right there.
Okay.
So we can argue about it in the next meeting.
I mean, then that could be stepped down to 2 stories. I mean, that would be, 2 stories can sit next to a 1-story building easily enough. So, I will tell you that if I were in that historic building and I was living next to a parking lot, and then you told me I would be living next to a 3-story building, that was a senior housing, I would much rather live next to the senior housing than a parking lot. Much rather. Because I would get a more walkable community. It's not going to affect their son. But yeah, I'll tell you what, we can model it.
This is
We can model it.
really great feedback and exactly why we're presenting the ideas, testing concepts, showing what could be possible to get that feedback with you all. You could really hate something and really love something else. So we really appreciate that, and we will continue to take all that and work with you all to refine these. We just want to show what could be possible long-term, try to work with you all to set that vision. Who's next?
I don't want to completely echo, but I do echo the tennis court area and the parking. I have a sensation of, have you been here in the middle of winter and seen the parking and been in the melee of people trying to get up to the mountain? Also the size of things. I know that where we're trying to put housing and such is, we got to have doors, but in particular, is it maybe possible to do an upward parkade in somewhere? I don't know if that's an answer to, because really there's a large parking question. And if parking lots are of no value, maybe this could be a city earned, because there is going to be costs for snow removal and such. Obviously, you don't want to have a pitched roof, but you're still going to have to move snow. So you make that be a possible earner of a parking lot. And I think the idea of that space being the sunshine that's being used is simply because you're not seeing those areas are used. They have to be replaced somewhere, but necessarily there is potential for building bigger things, maybe not in the core of this sweet little town.
That's a great comment, and I think we can definitely continue to take all that feedback to keep looking into this area. We'll go Nicole and then to David.
I'm sure this is probably considered, but what about instead of 3 stories in some of those more central buildings, 2 stories, using more space and then developing underground parking? Because, they're doing very deep underground parking in cities and things. I would imagine it's got to be possible here.
We allow underground parking currently, and if you think about it, surface parking costs X. Structured parking costs 2X. Underground parking costs 4X. It is unbelievably expensive. So we did a little exercise. What if we put a parking deck on the 4-way? $15 million. That's going up. So let's go to $45 million if we go down. And so just giving order, and so we're actually considering, because there's no underground parking here, and I wanted to announce this, so thank you very much for the question. We are considering asking the council and the community to consider banning any underground parking for several reasons, right? There's all sorts of groundwater undermining utility concerns, but the bigger one is the cost of construction. The town isn't doing this plan to build expensive housing. We're not here to build more. We're here to try to leverage the zoning code to get what the community needs out of it. And nowhere that I know that's put in underground parking has put back in affordability at a mass scale, right? It becomes super expensive. So you think of Telluride and you think of Aspen, they both have underground parking. Their price points will tear down our $2 million single families and replace them with 10 million. And so it becomes an economic question, and we have a window right now to just prohibit it. So again, we, hearing the community, are doing this plan to build what we need and not build anything. And so that's sort of our consideration. We'd love to get your thoughts on underground. So this is all surface parked, which makes it very affordable. And for 6th Street Station, we actually give bonuses for underground parking, so they got more density with it. Neil went over that. So that was our idea, and I wanted to sort of, at least you to understand the costs and what it ramifications. We really couldn't build affordable housing with the parking underground.
Yeah, sure. Regarding the 6th Street Station project, I remember when I guess probably the first iteration that was called 6th Street Station, the reason we call it that, there was 2 of the 4 blocks were fully built out. One of the blocks was gonna be, it's gonna have like 5 or 6 basically single family sized buildings on it. And the other one was gonna be open. And I think one of the things that sticks out to me about the general approach is that it seems to be maximizing building spaces. I can see the sense to that, but I also just was hoping you would address a little bit maybe the lack of providing any new open space or park space. And I also just wanted to mention, in defense of the Meadows, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. We do have 15 parking places. Just making sure everybody knows that.
It was my understanding, and you should probably address this, that this was essentially a luxury hotel proposition, right? A luxury hotel. So when you're doing a luxury hotel and you have essentially a price point that is beyond what anybody can imagine, you can do a lot of different things, including not building as much as the density provides, because you're going to make it up on an extraordinary rent in another way. In effect, by not building what the density allows, the people who are going to live or be guests there are subsidizing the unbuilt portion. So town could have a choice. They could say, well, you know, we don't want that height, so we'd rather have the luxury hotel and luxury housing. And that would be a choice that they could make. But that is the choice that was what was being offered. I mean, Troy, is that more or less what? Yeah.
And so, can we leverage the zoning?
Here, Mike.
Again, you're exactly right. And we're not here to build that luxury hotel. That's not why we're having this conversation. So where can we get the zoning? And by tweaking the heights and looking with our architect, we believe we can get the developer to help the town build affordable. Now, the town may need to financially help to make the math work, but it's not nearly as if the town is building new on its own. And so in some of these cases, yes, we'll get the developer to build what we want. In other cases, the town will have to partner with them to make the math work, but the town's investment in that is going to be considerably less than what the current zoning sort of says, hey, town, you're on your own. You figure out affordable housing. The zoning code's going to build for the amenity-based economy. So that's where we are. But you're exactly right. They are tweaks to the zoning. We don't think we over-densified the town. Obviously, how the four-way works, we'll tweak on that. But the intent is to leverage what is buildable and more affordable in exchange for things.
Is it the same developer who still owns the land, or is that land sold?
The land sold and lost its development rights. So 6th Street Station, as previously proposed, cannot happen. They've lost it. Mark Walters now owns those lots.
Let's go back to Nicole and
I
then
just
we'll go
wanted to
Matthew.
clarify the underground parking, if I understood correctly. Underground parking is not a good option in your description, because it's so expensive that then over 10 to 15 years, the town doesn't have that money to put into affordable housing. Do I understand that right?
Well, slightly, it's close. If you build, in a typical space these days, I don't know, in Denver, underground, it's probably around $75,000 per space, which is a lot of money to park a car. So where do you make that up? In most cities that have substantial underground parking have, what's on top of it typically is market rate stuff, either condos or rental or whatever. Market rate is a lot here. So most of the people the people that you're trying to meet, the working workforce, they are not going to be able to afford any of those units. Now, the developer you could put on some additional requirements that say, well, in order to get this, you have to build some affordable housing in there. And there's a thing you could do, but it's very tough. I mean, extremely. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is we've got several projects proposed here, and some people have thrown out like 15 years, whatever that is. It seems like, is there a way to prioritize these places? Because 6th Street Station to me sounds like the most pressing because it is privately owned, and Mark Walters could put in permits to build that out today if he wanted to, because the zoning is what it is. And as you've said, Neil, he can build it out exactly to zone. And that will piss everybody off in this room.
You're exactly right.
You have to go through Beaux-Arts, but otherwise, yes.
Sure. So, yeah, Beaux-Arts pending, but
So,
sure.
at the start of the presentation, we've just given you so much information. The zoning code is probably the most important thing to get adopted. Whatever the community wants, get it done as quickly as possible so we can influence the Walters every single property in town has to obey the new rules. And so the intent of that is to get to that as soon as possible. And we're scheduling it sort of starting in March, April to start changing it, but we have to have this plan done. And we have to be very intentional that every property owner knows what we're doing. We're not going to do anything behind anyone's back. But then there's the four-way TP, the library, the public projects. We have no money to do any of this. Just be honest. And so one of the potential alternatives is we're going to develop a housing strategy to potentially put a ballot initiative out to the community to create revenues. If the community is so excited about the housing plan, we have no money to do this. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait to recharge our coffers. And then we're going to have to be very selective. So the 15 years that you mentioned is really right now it's 0 years. There's just not going to happen. And we need to ask the community what's most important to you, and then council will reallocate the budgets from years to come. But imagine one project every 5 years. So the public-owned land that we showed examples on, that's probably a 40-year build-out with the current resources. It could be accelerated if the community says, hey, we really want it. Do it. But the zoning code will let that happen. Right now, a lot of the zoning code doesn't let the public do anything because we have to follow the same rules as the private sector. But the most important is get the zoning done, and that is whenever Mr. Walters or whoever is motivated to do something, that's when they'll do it. And the zoning code just says you're going to do it by certain rules.
It's actually impossible to predict what will, because there are 2 empty parcels on the other side of 6th. There are 2 empty parcels virtually across the street from this structure. Who knows? So it's Bellevue is a bunch of, we did 2 sites owned by one entity. There's a lot of parcels there. Who knows what's, going to happen. So, and one thing I've learned is that surprises happen.
I wanted to follow up on your question about parking and clarify that it's not just the impact that underground parking would have on affordability for affordable housing, but when you also allow underground parking for market rate, what they're going to produce to offset that is luxury. Like, we're in that space right now, that the cost of land, the cost of acquisition, the cost of new construction only will produce luxury, because that's the cost. It's just too damn expensive. And so if you allow underground parking as part of that, it just pushes that luxury higher, because they've got to get a return on their cash. And so, as Troy just said, like, we're bound to the same rules as everyone else. And so if we just eliminate underground parking, we kind of build in this marginal moment of affordability for everyone, not just affordability. It is at a cost, right? Like, we can't densify as much. But we also hear pretty consistently, like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes on the density. And so we kind of build in parking lots, and surface parking are great placeholders. You know, like, they just sit there. You know, is it the best thing in the middle of our town? That's obviously something we should talk about. But to eliminate underground parking kind of builds in a price cap to a degree.
Great. Thank you, Troy. And what was your name, sir? Neil.
Neil.
Thanks, Neil. I'm Seth Quigg. I don't live here. I actually live in Mount Crested Butte, Colorado. And I'm curious.
It's where I'm staying.
Welcome. What's been the conversation with Mount Crested Butte and the development up there? I attended the North Village presentation earlier this year, and they anticipate there to be 1,000 more cars upstream than Pitchfork, with each car making 2 trips to town a day. Says CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation. So I'm just curious how that's going to work.
So in our transportation plan that was done before any of this happened, we had that development in our numbers. So I just want to say this, brace yourself, congestion is your destiny. It just is. The question is, how big do you want the roads? So we could blow out the road and destroy the character of this town. We're still going to get the congestion.
Is there a way to make congestion not in our destiny?
No.
Dang.
But we can make it livable, we can make it slow, and we could make it intentional, right? Instead of fast and mean. So one of the best things I think happened in this valley is we've decided to put roundabouts, Cement Creek and Brush Creek, and instead of a signal. Because what the signal would do is stop traffic and force us to widen the road. So there's red lights and green lights. When the red lights happen, congestion backs up, road has to get wider. No one talks about that for signals. Roundabouts, you're coming in at 15 miles an hour, very safe for peds, very safe for bikes. These are single lane roundabouts. And so it's slow. And so congestion is our destiny. How fast do we want it is the question. And the town of Crested Butte wants it at 15 miles an hour. And the roundabout actually gives us permissions to talk to CDOT. So instead of that section between Elk and Red Lady being 25 miles an hour, we now have a physical design at Red Lady that allows us to have a real conversation with CDOT about making it 15 miles an hour. And we're trying to do enhanced transit so you have an alternative to congestion by getting on the bus. But we've decided not to make 6th Street a 4-lane road. And so we're going to be very intentional on making it slow and giving you a transit alternative. But we have their numbers in our numbers.
Thank you.
Any others?
Sure, I'll throw my hat in the ring. Neil, thank you.
Where is, I can't see.
Back
where you are.
here.
Okay, great.
Thank you. You and your team did an exceptional job. The graphics are very helpful. It's easy to understand. And the way to interact has been great. You've learned a lot about this town. Your presentation shows you're paying attention, which we really appreciate. Little details, knowing the names of the parks, things like that. It's important to us. We have such a unique scale that we want to preserve and feel, and the pedestrians and the bikes and the Vinatoc. So we need to teach you a little bit more. And there's so many layers to this. Turning that building at the 4-way to let the sun into the parking lot is going to be huge. we have such a unique snow and condition here that it's hard to really understand it unless you've experienced it.
I accept that. I want to hear more from you.
Yeah, so you're going to have to come ski. We're going to have to get you on the Queen.
It's been about 3 decades since I did that.
I promise I taught skiing here in 1994.
And I learned to ski in the East Coast,
Me too.
which, as you know, is like skiing on ice.
Well, it's an advantage.
Yeah, so
you got this.
I think I would be.
We'll get you. We'll get you out there. I always think about, my thoughts were like the reverse city where the density is in the middle and it sort of bleeds out. I'd like to do the opposite where the bigger buildings are hidden in a way. I guess we can't do anything about 6th Street Station. Oh, and I'm going to make one comment about parking underground. I've designed houses in town and in Telluride. Telluride obviously has hills on one side. A little easier, but if you saw these driveways that have to get underneath these houses and how steep they are, and they're just crazy. Secondly, we really can't even do it here because our water table. So just forget about it. I'm designing boats in town, and it's not that great. It's a boat.
Your boat. You're pumping water. It's
not great, not fun, not cheap. So with that said, our advantages are scale, our walkability, trying to maintain the pedestrian connections and the speed and slowing the cars down and just letting this town be what it is and not being anything else is the trick. So good luck and thanks again. And last comment, like the community, we know the little nuances, so we need to tell them things like shadows really will keep a snow pile until June. You just can't believe it. So thanks again. That's all I got.
I would love to just follow up with that yes, good luck to Neil, but I think really it's good luck to us as a community to work together and have these conversations. So again, it's the end of the beginning. So good luck to us. We got to keep showing up and engaging.
Neil, are you up to speed with like some of the smart technologies that cities are adopting right now?
I'm moderately up to speed. I'm not sure that would be considered an expert there. We used consultants to help us. But what do you have in mind?
Well, I was on a cohort called Leading Cities. I think it's an NGO out of Boston that has 50 different startups from all over the world that are coming together to bring ideas. And I thought about Crested Butte. But yeah, man, it might
there's everything from smart trash cans to smart street lights to, seriously, there's smart trash cans as a thing. Smart irrigation, all these kinds of things can be done. There's methods for, identifying pedestrian safety and unsafe conditions. All that can be done. And, there are people who are following that regularly. I'm not. But we, again, would use people that are.
Yeah, so maybe, I think where different industries intersect is the sweet spot for innovation, right? So, and we can move that to cultures, different cultures around the world. How are other people doing things? How are other countries doing things?
Yeah, I'll tell you here's an idea. I just wanted to throw something really off the wall. I don't know if any of you follow the social housing movement in places like Vienna. So Vienna has probably been the most successful city in the world, expensive city in the world, at providing affordable housing for its residents. It's extraordinary what's happened. And how have they done it? They have completely socialized housing, which is an amazing idea, but one that is not likely to get traction in many places in the United States. So it's something that people keep talking about, and there's going to be, at one point, there's going to be a town that tries to do it. And it's going to be documented, it's going to be the stuff of a textbook and Wall Street Journal, because it'll either be incredibly successful or a dud or whatever, but there's an interesting notion. Now, short of that, what we look for are ways that don't involve that. And again, they come from all sources. And we're employing a lot of them here, and we keep looking for more. And so we're constantly scanning. We go to conferences, particularly on affordable housing, because that's where my area of interest is, and hearing what people are doing. And it's usually involving creative financing. Because the secret, the little hidden or evil secret about those of us who design affordable housing is that there is nothing affordable about affordable housing. It's actually not that much of a secret. Affordable housing tends to cost a lot of money because the requirements that come with all of the documentation, the requirements for either union or equal wages for workers, all kinds of reasons that it becomes very expensive. And so it's all about the financing. So people are looking at innovative financing techniques. Modular housing is a way that people are hoping will help to reduce the cost of housing. And there are lots of people innovating in modular housing. So far, it's been difficult to actually achieve the significant savings, but it's still being worked on. So those are all areas of innovation. Yeah.
It's 7:30. So that's the end of the promised time. It is a Friday, so thank you very much. We'll sort of end the sort of formal question and answer. We can mingle more on the drawings if you have any questions, but the biggest thing is stay involved. Thank you so much, but hold us accountable to actually continue. We try really, really hard to get out. Madison and Mel are just remarkable in their outreach strategies, but we're not done, and spread the word. Stay participatory, but I just want to say thank you very much, and I do want to respect your Friday and say it is 7:30. So we're done, and thank you. But if you have any questions, the informal is still happening.
Yeah, we have sticky notes on the tables. You can read all the stickies that folks left this week with their feedback, please, and we'll stick around for any other questions. But thank you for spending your Friday night with us. If you signed in today when you got here, you will be added to our email list too, so you'll get all the upcoming dates and ways to engage. We send those out usually monthly, if not more often. So thank you so much.